Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. It was May 2019, and I was living alone in a small studio apartment on the east side of Portland, Oregon. I was 28, working night shifts as the only technician on duty for a small IT help desk downtown. The office was quiet after midnight, just the faint hum of the servers in the next room, and the occasional creak of the old HVAC system. I'd drink cheap coffee from a cracked mug, eat from vending machines, and kill time online between support tickets. Nights were long, especially toward 2 or 3 a.m., when the world outside the windows felt like it had stopped moving. That night was like any other. Rain had been falling since early evening, not heavy, just the constant drizzle that Portland is known for. The sidewalks glistened under the streetlights below the office windows. I had one call that night around 11:45 p.m., some printer issue that took 15 minutes to fix. After that, nothing. Silence. I had 6 hours left on shift. Out of boredom, I started browsing. I was always curious about the darker corners of the internet, mostly for tech curiosity, nothing criminal or stupid. I used Tor occasionally, mostly to read tech privacy forums or poke through onion sites that shared old operating system builds or leaked software manuals. It felt like rummaging through the forgotten attic of the internet. That night, after opening Tor, I scrolled through a familiar forum where people posted links to supposedly declassified archives, things that were usually just old public records repackaged as something mysterious. Then I saw it. A post titled Government Archives Open Access Experiment. It had been posted only an hour earlier by a user I didn't recognize. No comments, no votes, just the title and a single link, a .onion address next to a small red folder icon. The caption underneath said simply, "Testing Public Exposure Protocol." I clicked it, the page loaded slowly. Black background, white monospace text, nothing fancy. It listed dozens of folders named by year: 1967, 1973, 1984, 1991. All of them looked like scanned PDFs. Most had boring titles like Atmospheric Study Logs or Chemical Process Test 4C. But near the bottom of the list was one folder that didn't fit. 2018, Portland Subdivision 9B. That caught my eye immediately. It was too recent, and Subdivision 9B sounded nothing like the older technical names. Inside were hundreds of PDFs. I clicked one at random, Test Group B Log 12. The pages were scans of what looked like typewritten reports, some stamped with restricted. They described urban analysis experiments, response monitoring, and stimulus evaluation. The format looked like legitimate government paperwork, letterheads, signatures, file codes, but something felt off. There were references to subjects and behavioral conditions, written in the dry language of science. One paragraph mentioned unaware subjects in public environments. Another referenced Portland field nodes 3A through 9B. It was creepy but fascinating. I opened more. Then I noticed something else in that same folder. A file named Portland Subdivision 9B Human Analysis.pdf. It was almost a gigabyte in size, which was strange for a PDF. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. The file took a long time to open. When it finally did, it wasn't text. It was image after image. Hundreds of photographs, black and white stills from what looked like security cameras. Grocery stores, bus stops, laundromats, building lobbies, apartment hallways. The angles were odd: high corners, hidden lenses, ceiling corners. Each photo had a caption below it. Subject of 54, unaware of surveillance. Subject, resistant to stimuli. Subject, 93, high visual response. Every note ended with a location and timestamp, all in Portland. The timestamps were recent, weeks, sometimes days old. At first I thought it had to be fake. Some kind of project to scare people, maybe staged photos. But the images were too real. The grain, the lighting, the details, they looked like real surveillance stills. Some even had metadata in the bottom corner. Camera ID numbers, file paths, frame counts. I scrolled faster. Then I froze. In one image, I recognized the inside of my own building's lobby. The brick wall, the narrow mail slot window, the reflection on the floor, all exactly right. The image showed someone standing near the elevator, head down, wearing a dark blue jacket with a white drawstring hood. My jacket, same shape, same stains near the cuff. The timestamp in the corner read 02-1239. I glanced at the clock in the corner of my monitor. It was 2:31 a.m. The photo had been taken less than 20 minutes earlier. My chest went tight. I stopped breathing for a second. I closed the window immediately, shut Tor, yanked out the Ethernet cable, then unplugged the router from the wall. I just sat there staring at the blank monitor, the faint reflection of my face in the glass, heart pounding. I remember checking behind me, the corners of the office, even the hallway outside. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I left early that morning, didn't even clock out. The streets outside were wet and empty. Every time I passed a street camera or traffic light, I found myself lowering my head. I didn't want to see a lens looking back. That night I didn't sleep. I unplugged my laptop, turned off my phone, even taped over my webcam. For 2 days I barely left the apartment. My mind kept looping through the same thought. Who was running that site? Was it a hoax or something real? Was I being watched before I even found it? By the third day, I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone staged photos from different places in the city and used random timestamps. I almost believed it. A week later, I came home from a late grocery run. The hallway in my building was quiet. Lights dim, carpet slightly damp from someone's umbrella. I noticed something wedged under my apartment door. A red envelope. Plain, thick paper, no writing on it. Inside was a small black USB stick. No note, no markings except a small white label on one side. It read simply, 9B. My first reaction was to throw it away immediately. I dropped it on the kitchen counter, turned on the tap, washed my hands. It felt contaminated, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. I kept staring at it from across the room for an hour. What if it was something harmless? Or a message? Or proof of something? At around midnight, I drove out toward the river. The streets were empty. The city lights reflected on the water like broken glass. I rolled down the window, felt the damp air, and held the USB in my hand for a long time. Then I threw it into the river and watched it disappear. For weeks after, I felt uneasy. Every time I passed a camera, in a parking garage, a store, an elevator, I wondered if someone was on the other end, cataloging me as subject A, aware of surveillance. I even moved apartments a month later to the other side of town, closer to a friend. I told myself it was for a shorter commute, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Months passed and the fear dulled into background noise. I got used to ignoring it, telling myself that whatever that site was, it was gone now, buried under the countless other hidden links that vanish every day. But sometimes, when I walk home late at night, I'll notice something small. A flash from a high window, the faint reflection of a lens in the corner of a streetlight, the soft mechanical tilt of a camera following as I cross the street. I don't know if it's just my mind replaying that night, or if somewhere out there that same file is still updating, frame by frame. And if it is, I know I'm still in it. It was late August 2022, and Austin was caught in one of those stretches of heat that doesn't break even after sunset. I'd been working from home for months, and most nights I just sat at my desk with the blinds shut. A fan pointed at me, half listening to whatever videos were playing in the background. My apartment was small, one bedroom near Riverside, ground floor, cheap rent, the kind of place that felt temporary, even after 2 years of living there. One evening, a friend from university texted me a link on Signal, something he said I had to see. We used to spend hours messing around on the internet in college, exploring weird corners of forums, watching strange YouTube videos that felt like they shouldn't exist. So when he said, "This one's wild, real live feeds," I clicked without thinking much. The link didn't open in Chrome though. It was a Onion address. He told me to use Tor. I hadn't used it in years, but I still had it installed. The site loaded after a few seconds. Black background, plain white text. At the top it said hidden streams. Below it were hundreds of links, each one a string of random characters. Next to them were small thumbnails, frozen images from what looked like home security cameras, baby monitors, webcams, front door feeds. It didn't look fake. Some thumbnails showed empty living rooms. Others showed people, sleeping, cooking, sitting on couches. No usernames, no comments. Just a warning at the top. Feeds collected automatically. View at your own risk. We started clicking through them. The first one was a kitchen somewhere. You could tell it was morning by the light through the window. A woman in a bathrobe poured coffee. Another feed showed a man in a recliner watching TV. A few showed pets wandering around empty rooms. It was strange, like flipping through someone's life 1 second at a time. At first it was almost boring. We'd stay on a feed for 30 seconds, then move to another. It felt wrong, obviously, but there was a distance to it. It didn't feel real, not in the way seeing something in person would. I kept telling myself these were probably just public test streams or open IP cameras that hadn't been secured. Still, it made my stomach twist a little. Then I clicked on one that made me stop. It was a small bedroom. A single bed pushed against the wall, gray sheets, an IKEA desk under a window, laptop open, lamp beside it. Posters, movie ones, taped unevenly to the wall. A pair of shoes near the door. The camera was fixed in one corner of the ceiling, wide angle, slightly tilted. For a few seconds I just stared, trying to place why it looked so familiar. I thought maybe it was one of those generic setups you see everywhere. Same cheap furniture, same neutral colors. But then I noticed something that made my mouth go dry. On the desk was a silver laptop. Same model as mine, same sticker near the trackpad. A fading one from a tech conference I went to. The same desk lamp, a white IKEA one with a small dent near the base. Then I saw the scratch, a faint line on the side of the desk near the drawer. I remembered making it when I moved the desk against the wall last year. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was starting to pound, heavy and irregular. The posters, even those were the same. The exact same crooked alignment. The same tear on the corner of the Blade Runner print. It wasn't just a similar room. It was my room. The realization hit me slowly, like heat spreading through my chest. I turned around in my chair and looked behind me. My blinds were closed, but the room looked identical to what I saw on the screen. Every object was in the same place. I looked back at the feed. The image shifted slightly. The camera adjusted its focus. For a moment I thought maybe there was a delay, but then I noticed something worse. In the corner of the feed, I could see a figure sitting at the desk. The back of their head. My head, I froze. It wasn't an old recording. I could see myself moving, tilting slightly, the same way I was doing right then. I spun in my chair, scanning every corner of my room, trying to find a lens, a reflection, anything. Nothing looked out of place. No red lights, no black dots, nothing hidden on the shelves or walls. But on the screen I could still see myself, still moving. Then something new appeared at the bottom of the feed, a small text box. Someone had typed into it. The message appeared in white right below the video. Smile, I didn't move. My whole body went tight. On the feed, I could see my face now, barely turned toward the laptop screen, eyes wide. I didn't think. I reached behind the desk and yanked the power cord out of the wall. The screen went black instantly. The fan kept spinning for a second before the room went silent. I just sat there, breathing hard, in the dark, listening for any sound. For the rest of the night, I didn't plug the laptop back in. I checked my phone. No signal for some reason. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep much. Every creak in the building made me sit up. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and texted my friend. He didn't answer. I tried calling. No response. Maybe he was sleeping. Maybe he didn't want to talk about it, but I didn't press. I turned the laptop on again. When it powered up, the webcam light blinked. Once, twice, 3 times, and then stayed off. It had never done that before. I checked all my settings. The webcam driver was listed as unknown device. I uninstalled it. Scanned for malware. Dozens of weird files popped up in the temp folder. Ones I'd never seen. Some had names like CamHostXE and VidStream Client. I deleted everything. I ran the scan again. Still, the light blinked when I restarted. 3 times, exactly the same. I put a piece of tape over the camera lens. It made me feel a little better, but I still couldn't shake the thought that whoever had access before might still have it. I spent hours reading about remote access tools, webcam exploits, how hackers use them. There were stories about people finding their own rooms on dark web streams, usually traced back to a phishing link or a compromised driver update. It didn't help much. Every explanation still led back to the same fact. Someone, at some point, had control of my camera. Someone who knew where I lived. I replaced the laptop eventually. Bought a new one, fresh install, no old files. Changed my Wi-Fi password. Replaced the router, even set up a VPN. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few weeks later, around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. No name, just a message. It said, "Nice new setup. The black desk looks better." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. I didn't reply. I didn't tell anyone. Now, whenever I sit at my desk, I keep the blinds open so I can see the reflection of everything behind me. I unplug the webcam when I'm not using it. I even cover the small pinhole mic with tape. But sometimes, late at night, when the screen goes dark for a second or two between videos, I think I see a faint image overlaid, the same camera angle, the same old gray sheets, and the same flicker of movement in the corner. It's always there for just a blink, like a reminder, and then just before it disappears, the webcam light flashes 3 times. It was November 2021 when I found that job posting. I'd been out of work for about 4 months by then, and I was starting to feel the kind of desperation that changes your sense of judgment. Rent was behind. My overdraft was maxed out, and I'd already sold off a few things to keep myself afloat. My old camera, a couple of monitors, even my watch. I spent most nights scrolling through encrypted job boards on the dark web. Places people went when they couldn't find work anywhere else, or didn't care what kind of work it was. That night, around 11 p.m., I found a listing that looked different from the usual scams and junk offers. The title said Freelance Logistics, Immediate Start, 1 night only. The description was short but precise. It said, must rent a van, vehicle type specified. Use provided identity documents. Arrive at a specified warehouse in Salford by midnight. Do not ask questions. No photos or recordings. The pay was listed as $1,500 for the night. Paid in Bitcoin instantly after completion. I stared at that number for a long time. $500 for 1 night. It was too much, which made it suspicious, but I couldn't ignore it. I told myself it was probably just a sketchy delivery job. Maybe moving something untaxed or imported under the radar. I'd done courier work before. This didn't seem that different on the surface. I replied through the encrypted message form. A minute later, I got a response. A PDF attachment, password protected. The password was included in the message body, cipher read. Inside the file were step-by-step instructions. It even included scans of fake identity documents under a name that wasn't mine, but close enough that I could remember to respond to it if asked. It was shockingly organized, like someone who knew how to make something illegal look professional. I spent the next day trying to convince myself not to do it. But the longer I stared at my empty account and unpaid bills, the easier it was to rationalize. By 6 p.m., I'd rented a white Ford Transit van from a local place in Ardwick using the ID they'd given me. The guy behind the counter didn't look twice at it. I told him I needed it overnight for a job near Buxton. He just nodded, handed me the keys and went back to scrolling through his phone. The instructions said to arrive at a warehouse in Salford by midnight. The location was off a back road near the River Irwell, in an industrial estate that looked half abandoned. I left my flat around 11:15, rain hitting the windshield the whole way there. Manchester in November has that kind of cold that gets into your bones, damp and heavy. I remember the yellow streetlights reflecting off the puddles on Regent Road as I turned off toward the warehouses. When I pulled up, the place looked empty except for one large building at the far end, with a faint orange glow coming from inside. The steel shutter door was half open, and I could see silhouettes moving. I parked just outside and sat there for a moment, thinking about turning back. But then I reminded myself that I'd already come this far. I got out, zipped my jacket up against the wind, and walked toward the warehouse. 3 men were inside. They were wearing black clothing, face coverings, gloves. Not a single word was said. One pointed at the van, and I nodded like I knew exactly what I was doing. They wheeled out 2 long wooden crates, maybe 8 feet each, narrow but heavy-looking. They loaded them into the back of the van with practiced efficiency, like they'd done this before. The sound of wood scraping against metal echoed in the empty lot. When they were done, one of them walked up to me and handed me a phone. It was a cheap Android model, locked, the screen showing a single app, maps with a pinned route that ended somewhere near Buxton. The destination wasn't named, just coordinates. Then, without a word, they closed the van doors, stepped back, and one of them lowered the shutter on the warehouse. I didn't wait around. I got in the van, started it up, and followed the GPS route. At first, I tried not to think about what might be inside the crates. I told myself it could be anything. Machinery, tools, stolen goods. But as I drove, my mind started to drift. I kept hearing the faintest thud or scrape from the back, but it might have just been the road. I didn't want to check. The phone's GPS took me south out of Manchester, through Stockport, then onto smaller, darker roads past Chapel-on-the-Frith. There were fewer and fewer lights, just long stretches of wet tarmac reflecting the headlights. The rain kept coming down harder, and the wipers squeaked every few seconds. About an hour in, I hit a deep pothole. The whole van jolted, and I heard one of the crates shift hard against the side. There was a crack, the wood splintering. My stomach dropped. I pulled over onto the shoulder, turned on the hazard lights, and got out. The air outside was freezing. The road was completely empty. No houses, no passing cars, nothing but the sound of rain hitting the van roof. I opened the back doors to check the damage. One of the crates had shifted about a foot. The corner of the lid had split open just enough to see inside. I wish I hadn't looked. Under the broken wood, there was plastic wrapping, and under that, skin. A shoulder, pale, unmoving. Then I saw a faint movement, shallow breathing. There was a woman inside. Her mouth was taped shut, arms bound with duct tape, eyes closed. She was alive, but barely. My entire body went cold. I remember backing away instinctively, heart hammering in my throat. I stood there in the rain for what felt like minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. Every instinct in me said to untape her, to get her out, to call the police. I climbed back inside, hands shaking, found a box cutter in the glove compartment, and went to cut the tape around her mouth. But before I even touched it, the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text message flashed across the locked screen. "Do not interfere. Keep driving." I froze. Another vibration came a few seconds later. "You are being watched." That second message made me drop the phone. I looked around, scanning the dark road. I couldn't see anything through the rain, but the idea that someone was out there watching me made my stomach twist. For a few seconds, I just stood there, my breath visible in the cold air. Then I picked up the phone again and sat back in the driver's seat. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't know what else to do. So I kept driving. The rest of that drive felt like it lasted forever. Every few minutes I'd check the mirrors, half expecting another vehicle to appear behind me. But there was nothing, just the dark, winding roads and the sound of the engine. The woman in the crate made faint noises, weak like she was trying to move. I turned the radio on to drown it out, but all I got was static. Eventually, after another half hour, the GPS started zooming in on the destination. It was somewhere off a narrow country lane surrounded by thick forest. The map ended at a dirt track barely visible through the rain. I followed it for about 50 meters until the phone chimed and the route ended. I stopped the van. The phone screen turned black. There were no lights, no buildings, just trees and fog. I waited, thinking someone would show up, but nobody did. The rain had turned into a mist, hanging low around the headlights. After a few minutes, I got out and looked around. It was silent except for the ticking of the engine cooling. I felt like something was wrong, like maybe they'd decided not to meet me after all. Then I saw headlights approaching from the other direction. 2 vehicles, black SUVs. They rolled to a stop a few meters behind me. No one got out. After about 10 seconds, my phone buzzed again. Leave the van, walk away. Do not look back. I stood there for a moment staring at the message, then did what it said. I grabbed my jacket tighter and started walking down the dirt track in the opposite direction, back toward the main road. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see what they were doing with the crates. I walked for almost an hour before I saw a light, a small petrol station by the roadside. I went inside, used the bathroom, washed my hands even though they weren't dirty. I just needed to feel like I was doing something normal. Then I sat in a corner by the window until morning. When the sun came up, I took a train back to Manchester. I didn't go home right away. I sat in a cafe near Piccadilly Station for a while, just staring at my phone. The delivery app was gone. The device wouldn't turn on anymore. When I checked my crypto wallet, the payment had already been sent, exactly $1,500 worth. For a few days, I tried to convince myself it was all over, that I'd done what I was told, and that nobody would come looking for me. But I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the crate. I didn't know if she was still alive, or if she'd ever made it out of that van. I thought about going to the police, but I didn't even know what I'd say. I had no proof, and I'd used a fake name to rent the van. Then, 3 days later, I went back on that encrypted board. I don't even know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe guilt. I searched for the same hiring section. It was still there, but the post I'd answered was gone. In its place, near the top of the board, was a new one. It was titled, Liability Resolved. The post had no message body, just a list of information. My real name, my actual address in Manchester, a recent photo from my social media, and the words, Resolved. 28/11/21. That was the last time I ever opened that board. I deleted everything. The Tor browser, the wallet, the backups. But deleting something doesn't make it disappear. For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every time a van drove by my flat, I'd look out the window. Every sound in the hallway made me freeze. A few times I thought I saw the same car parked across the street. Black, tinted windows, engine running. It might have been nothing. I stopped leaving my flat after dark. I never reported any of it. I told myself there was nothing I could do. But the truth is, I was terrified of what would happen if I did. Whoever they were, they knew who I was. They had my name, my face, my address. They'd been watching me that night. They'd known when I stopped, when I looked inside the crate. Now, every November, when it starts raining like that again, I think about her. The woman in the box, barely breathing. The way her chest moved, shallow and slow. I think about how close I was to helping her, and how quickly fear made me stop. I used to think I was just a bystander in whatever that was. But I wasn't. I was part of it. And whoever wrote that post, whoever marked me as resolved, they wanted me to remember that. So I do, every night. I was backpacking through Southeast Asia in early 2018, moving from Thailand down through Malaysia. I'd been in Kuala Lumpur for a few days, staying in a rundown hostel near Chow Kit. It was the kind of place that smelled like damp laundry and cheap disinfectant, with broken ceiling fans and half the lights flickering. The hallway was narrow, painted a dull green that probably hadn't been touched since the 90s. My bunk creaked every time I shifted. I didn't mind though. It was cheap and I was just there to sleep and move on. There were a few regulars in that hostel, long-term travelers, people who'd run out of money, maybe even some who lived there permanently. One guy, a quiet Australian who'd been in Southeast Asia for months, mentioned something strange one night while we were sitting in the shared kitchen. He told me about a dark web rental thing. He said it was an underground Airbnb, meant for people who wanted to go completely off-grid. No ID, no registration, no questions asked. You paid in Bitcoin, got a key, and had total privacy. He said it like a joke, but he also said he'd seen listings for rooms in different cities, all called Room 43. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop, connected to the hostel's weak Wi-Fi, and used Tor. I'd been on the dark web before, mostly out of curiosity, never for anything illegal. It's mostly boring forums and sketchy marketplaces. But I searched for what he mentioned. Eventually, after going through several forums and dead links, I found it. A site with a plain black background and white text. It didn't even have a name, just a string of random characters as the address. The layout looked like a stripped-down rental platform. There were categories for short-term stays, underground housing, and hourly rooms. Each listing had photos, descriptions, and a price in Bitcoin. Most of the listings were in Eastern Europe and South America, but one caught my eye. Room 43, Kuala Lumpur, hourly or nightly rate. The photos were simple. A small apartment room with white walls, a single bed, and a small wooden desk under a window with metal bars. The kind of cheap apartment you'd find anywhere in the city. The listing said, full privacy, no cameras, no check-in, key available at designated pickup, pay up front, leave key after stay. It even mentioned the area, Jalan Raja Laut, which wasn't far from Chow Kit. I thought it was probably some scam or prank, but I had a little bit of Bitcoin left from earlier travel experiments, and curiosity outweighed common sense. I paid for one night. Within minutes, I got an automatic message. It gave detailed instructions. Walk to a laundry shop on Jalan Raja Laut, look for a green mailbox beside the entrance, and pick up a key inside an envelope marked 43. Then follow the attached map to the address. It was around 8 p.m. when I went. The area was quieter than usual. A few food stalls still open. Motorbikes passing now and then. The laundry shop was closed for the night. Lights off inside. The green mailbox was exactly where the message said it would be. I opened it and inside was an envelope. Plain white with 43 written on it in thick black marker. Inside was a small silver key with a red plastic tag. The building was only a few blocks away. An old low-rise structure wedged between newer apartments and small offices. The ground floor was shuttered up. The entrance to the upper floors was through a narrow hallway that smelled like mold and wet cement. The walls were peeling. I counted the steps, 3 flights up. There was no elevator, just a flickering fluorescent tube that buzzed constantly. The key fit a gray metal door with a faded sticker that read, Room 43. The door was scratched. The paint chipped around the lock. I pushed it open. The first thing that hit me was the cold. The air inside was freezing, way colder than it should have been for a humid night in Kuala Lumpur. There was no sound except for the faint hum of the small fridge in the corner. The room was small, maybe 12 by 10 feet. A single bed against one wall, thin mattress with a gray sheet, a cheap wooden desk under a barred window, a chair, a wardrobe with one door slightly broken. There was a single camera on a tripod in front of the bed, pointed directly at it. I froze when I saw that. The camera's red recording light was off. It looked unplugged. I followed the cord. It wasn't connected to anything. Still, I pulled the cable out of the wall and set the whole thing aside. There was also a faint smell in the room, something metallic mixed with damp wood. Not strong, but noticeable. I unpacked my small bag, just clothes and my laptop. As I set my stuff down, I noticed scratches on the wooden floor near the bed frame. Thin, parallel marks like something heavy had been dragged the same way again and again. I crouched to look closer. They ran from the bed toward the center of the room, then stopped abruptly. The walls had faded stains like water damage, but the patterns didn't make sense and they were too low, too irregular, more like smudges. I tried to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just a neglected rental. I'd seen worse while backpacking. I decided to shower before sleeping. The bathroom was a tiny cubicle attached to the corner, tiled in off-white that had turned yellow with age. The shower barely worked, just a trickle of cold water. I stood under it for a few minutes, then came out and sat on the bed, scrolling through my phone. That's when I noticed I had no signal, no bars, no Wi-Fi. I opened settings, tried to search for networks. Nothing. I thought maybe the thick concrete walls were blocking it, but even near the window, there was nothing. I decided to leave and find a cafe or at least get back to the street for signal. But when I went to unlock the door, the key wouldn't turn. The bolt inside felt jammed. I tried again, harder this time, but it wouldn't move. I twisted it until my wrist hurt. Then I tried pulling, pushing, turning, nothing. The deadbolt was stuck in place. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to panic, but the feeling of being locked in was suffocating. I tried the window next, but it was barred. Thick metal rods embedded into the frame. No way out. I banged on the door, calling out, hoping someone on the other side would hear. The walls muffled the sound. After a while, my throat hurt from shouting. I sat down, breathing heavily, trying to calm myself. I checked my phone again, still no signal. Time passed slowly. The hum of the fridge grew louder in the silence. Every small noise made me jump. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I felt watched. The camera was unplugged, but I still moved it to face the wall. I turned off the light, sat in the corner of the room, knees to my chest, and waited. Somewhere after midnight, I heard something, a faint sound from the hallway, like someone walking slowly past the door. Then it stopped. Silence again. I held my breath. A minute later, there was a knock, not loud, just 2 slow knocks. Then nothing. I didn't move. I stared at the door, waiting for another sound. None came. My skin felt cold and damp. I stayed like that for what felt like hours. At some point, I must have dozed off sitting against the wall. When I opened my eyes again, pale morning light was seeping through the blinds. I felt dizzy and dehydrated. I tried the door again. This time the key turned easily. The bolt slid back like nothing had ever been wrong. I opened the door cautiously, expecting someone outside. But the hallway was empty. Quiet. I didn't even bother locking it. I grabbed my bag and got out as fast as I could. My legs were shaking as I ran down the stairs. Outside, the morning heat hit me like a wall. The streets were waking up. People opening shops, traffic starting to build. I found the nearest cafe, sat down, and just sat there for 20 minutes trying to process what had happened. My phone finally showed signal. I checked messages, looked up maps. Everything worked normally again. I tried to find the dark web listing again later that afternoon. The page still existed, but room 43 was gone. In its place was room 44. Same photos, same description, same location. Only the number had changed. I thought about reporting it, but what would I even say? I didn't have an address that matched anything official, and the listing was on a hidden service. I couldn't even explain how I found it without admitting I'd been browsing the dark web. That night back at the hostel, I noticed something odd when I was repacking. The key. I had forgotten to leave it behind. It was still in my pocket, the red tag faintly scratched now. Under the number 43, there was something etched into the plastic, so faint I hadn't noticed before. I held it under the light. It said 44. That was the last time I ever used Tor while traveling. Weeks later in Singapore, I tried searching the address again out of curiosity. The building didn't exist on Google Maps. Street View showed only an empty lot where it should have been. I sometimes wonder what that room was used for, who set it up, why the camera was there, and how the lock jammed on its own. Maybe someone was testing something. Maybe it was a setup for recordings or worse, for people who didn't get out. Whatever it was, I was lucky. I left with nothing more than a story and a scar on my hand, where I'd scraped the door while trying to force it open. Every time I think about Kuala Lumpur now, I don't think of the food stalls or the Petronas Towers or the noise of Jalan Alor. I think of that silent, freezing room with the camera, the scratches on the floor, and the sound of 2 slow knocks in the dark. and I wonder what happened to the person who booked room 44. I started freelancing in late 2019, after leaving a small analytics firm in Hamburg. Most of my clients came through encrypted job boards, places where companies posted specialized data work, usually anonymized. I didn't think much of it. I liked the privacy and the money was good. In early January 2020, I got a new project offer through one of those boards. The client identified themselves as Visage Data GmbH, supposedly based in Berlin. They wanted me to catalog image sets for facial clustering. I'd done similar work before, cleaning up data sets for machine learning projects that trained algorithms to recognize expressions, age, and gender. The task sounded simple. Tag each image with gender and emotional expression. The pay was generous, $2,500 for what looked like a week's work. After confirming, they sent me an encrypted hard drive by courier. It arrived 2 days later, a matte black 1TB SSD with a label reading Dataset, VSG Munich 2020. Inside the package was a printed note with a password and a short instruction sheet. It said, "Extract the image folders. Label each image with metadata. Do not rename or alter file structures. Do not attempt to trace sources." That last line struck me as odd. Usually clients didn't bother saying that, but I shrugged it off. When I plugged in the drive and opened the folders, I found over 30 subfolders named after cities: Munich, Berlin, Hamburg, Frankfurt, and others. Inside each were hundreds of portrait images, mostly mid-shot photos of people's faces. The file names had timestamps down to the second, suggesting they were part of some continuous collection. Each photo looked professional. Consistent framing, neutral backgrounds, good lighting. Most faces were expressionless, staring straight into the lens. Male, female, all ages. For the first few days, I went through the process automatically. I labeled hundreds of faces: female, mid-20s, neutral, male, 40s, slight smile, and so on. But as I moved deeper into the Munich folder, I started noticing something strange. Some faces appeared more than once. Same person, same background, but small differences. The tilt of the head, a different shirt, subtle changes in lighting, and the timestamps were days or weeks apart. At first, I assumed it was part of a longitudinal dataset, maybe tracking how expressions changed over time. But the duplication felt inconsistent, random. Then one night, while reviewing the folder Munich 2020 or 114, I came across a sequence that didn't match the others. It started normally. Clear portraits of a man in his 30s, brown hair, clean-shaven, sitting in front of what looked like a plain wall. But as the timestamps progressed, the setting shifted. The man was no longer indoors. He was in a car. The lighting changed to streetlights reflecting through the windshield. His expression became tense. The final image in that set stopped me cold. The timestamp read 03/22/41. It showed the same man slumped in the driver's seat, head tilted toward the side window. There was a dark streak across the glass. Blood. I stared at it for a long time. The file resolution was high enough that I could see the reflection of a street lamp outside, and faint outlines of nearby buildings. It wasn't a movie still. It looked real. I tried to convince myself it was a staged image. Maybe this dataset was being used to train some kind of detection algorithm for emergency response or car accident recognition. That would make sense, right? But the longer I looked, the less it felt like that. Curiosity got the better of me. I started checking other folders: Berlin, Prague, Zurich. And in every one of them, the pattern was the same. Dozens of clean portraits. Then somewhere near the end, the setting would change slightly. The person outside, in a car, near a building, or sitting on a bed. And the last image always showed them dead or injured. Sometimes with visible trauma. Sometimes simply lying still, eyes open. Every final image had a timestamp between 3 and 4 a.m. I felt sick. I backed up the dataset to my external drive just in case, thinking maybe I should report it. I checked the contact email from the client. It was a Proton mail address. I wrote a short message asking for clarification. trying not to sound accusatory. The message bounced back within seconds. Address not found. I tried searching for Visage Data GmbH online. Nothing. No registration in Berlin, no LinkedIn employees, no company number. It didn't exist. That's when the unease turned to fear. I closed everything, unplugged the SSD, and decided to leave it alone until the next day. But the next morning when I turned my laptop on, something was off. It booted slowly, almost like it was stuck in a loop. Then the screen flickered once and went black. When it came back, the desktop was empty. Every single file was gone. Not just the project data, everything. Documents, photos, downloads. It wasn't a system crash. It was a wipe. I checked my router logs. Around 3:22 a.m., the same time as that last image's timestamp, there had been a remote access event. I had no idea how. I didn't have any remote software installed. The SSD no longer mounted either. When I connected it, it didn't appear at all. Not even as an unformatted drive. Completely dead. I sat there in silence for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to go to the police, but what would I say? That I got paid anonymously to sort through photos that now no longer existed? I had no evidence. No proof the images were real. 2 days later, I woke up to find my Wi-Fi router blinking oddly. I logged in to check. The access logs showed multiple failed attempts from unknown IP addresses, all from within Germany. I changed my passwords and turned the router off completely. That night, my phone buzzed. No number displayed, just a blank caller ID. I didn't answer. A minute later, the notification light blinked. I thought it was a missed call, but it wasn't. It was a new folder on my desktop. The laptop had been off, completely disconnected from the internet, and yet somehow there it was, a single folder named Next. I clicked it. Inside were a few subfolders: room, kitchen, window, outside. My stomach tightened. Inside each were images, freshly taken, perfectly framed, same style as the others. But these weren't strangers. They were of my apartment, my furniture, my street, my face. The first one showed me sitting at my desk from behind, working. I didn't remember anyone taking that picture. The next was closer, me looking at my screen. Another was through the window at night, blinds half drawn. The last image made my blood run cold. It was taken from across the street, my bedroom window glowing faintly. Inside, my silhouette was visible near the curtain. The timestamp read 03:22:08. I don't remember closing my laptop after that. I just grabbed my wallet, my passport, and left. I spent the rest of that night in a cheap hotel near Hauptbahnhof, trying to decide what to do. By morning, I went back to the apartment to grab essentials. Everything looked normal, but when I turned on my computer again, the Next folder was gone. The drive was empty. Even the system logs had been cleared. For a week, I kept my devices off. No phone, no laptop. I bought a new one under a different name later, just to check if anything would happen again. So far, nothing has, but I still think about that timestamp, 03:22, and how every last photo ended at the same minute. Sometimes I wake up around that hour and see faint light on my wall, like a camera flash or a reflection. I tell myself it's just the street lamp outside, but I never go to the window to check. I moved to a different apartment a few months later, and I don't take freelance jobs like that anymore. Still, once in a while, when I open a folder on my computer, I see a flicker of something, an empty space where a file name appears for half a second, then disappears again, and every time that happens, it's always labeled Next. It started on a Friday night in April 2017. I was living in a small studio apartment just outside downtown Chicago, near Wicker Park. I'd been working remotely for a startup and spending too much time online, especially on Tor. I told myself it was for privacy, curiosity, that kind of thing, but truthfully it was boredom. Endless scrolling through hidden forums and strange archives became a kind of nightly ritual. I wasn't looking for anything illegal, just weird. Forgotten corners of the internet, abandoned threads, Lost experiments, files with no clear purpose. That night, I came across a post on one of the older tour boards I used to visit. The thread title caught my attention right away. Patient audio logs, archived research material. The post had been made years ago, maybe 2013 or 2014, but someone had recently replied, bumping it to the top. The description was vague. It claimed the recordings were leaked therapy sessions from a psychiatric facility that had supposedly shut down in the late 1990s. No other context. Just a few broken download links and one still working mirror. I hesitated for a while before clicking it. There was something about the simplicity of the post that felt wrong, like whoever uploaded it didn't want attention, just to leave something behind. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. The file name was simple too, Session 72 WAV. It was 38 minutes long, a little over 80 megabytes. I downloaded it to a separate folder on an encrypted drive, the one I usually kept for this kind of stuff. It was almost midnight when I decided to play it. The sound came through slightly distorted, as if it had been recorded on old analog tape. For a few seconds, I only heard low static and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then two voices faded in, one male, one female. The man sounded calm, professional. The woman sounded distant, tired, like she hadn't slept in days. She said she'd been seeing lights behind her eyes whenever she closed them. She said the floor in her apartment breathed, that it moved like an animal under her feet. The man didn't interrupt much. He only asked short questions, mostly letting her talk. His tone was steady, smooth in a way that didn't feel natural, like a practiced calm. About 15 minutes in, the woman's breathing changed. You could hear her shifting in the chair, nervous, whispering that she didn't want them to hear her anymore. She never explained who they were. The man reassured her, telling her she was safe. There was no warmth in his voice, though, just control. Halfway through the recording, she started to cry. Softly at first, then louder, gasping between words. The man's voice dropped even lower. He said, "It's almost over." Right after he said that, there was a loud metallic noise, like a chair being dragged or a door slamming against steel. Then silence. No static, no tape hiss, nothing. Just dead air. I waited, thinking maybe it had ended early. But after a few seconds, the sound returned. The man spoke again, but something was off. The tone was still calm, but it wasn't part of the session anymore. It was clear, direct. He said my full name. Not just my first name, my full name. Slowly, clearly. Then after a pause, he said, "You shouldn't have listened." The file ended right after that. I just sat there staring at the screen, replaying the last few seconds over and over. It was definitely my name. Same pronunciation. Same tone I'd hear from anyone who read it aloud. My first thought was that it had to be a prank. Some kind of interactive ARG or creepypasta thing. People do that all the time on the dark web. Maybe it was pulling my name from system metadata. But even then, the audio file was WAV format. It shouldn't have been able to do that. I checked my system processes, thinking maybe something had been running in the background. Nothing. No network spikes, no unknown programs. I unplugged my Ethernet cable anyway and sat back, trying to think logically. Eventually, I opened the folder again and right-clicked the file. The date created field said April 14th, 2017, 11:48 p.m. The exact minute I'd downloaded it. Not the time the file was uploaded. Not the time modified, created. Like it hadn't existed until I pulled it from the server. That didn't make sense. Even if the metadata changed during download, the creation time should have reflected the original source or compression. It was as if the file had been generated locally the moment I clicked it. I ran a hash check. No matches online. Reverse searched the file name, nothing. Not even on cached forums. The original thread was gone too. The page still loaded, but the links were dead. And the text had been replaced with a 404 message that said, "Removed at author's request." By then, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept telling myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the uploader used a script that inserted local metadata or personalized the file. But if that were true, why my name? I wasn't logged into anything on Tor. My alias had nothing to do with my real identity. I deleted the file, emptied the recycle bin, and shut down the drive. I even wiped the free space just in case. But when I reopened the encrypted folder, the file was still there. Same name, same size. I hadn't noticed it regenerating, but it was back. I didn't open it again. I unplugged the drive and left it disconnected. I told myself I'd reformat it the next day, but I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice saying my name. Flat, calm, certain. The next morning, I took the drive to my office and tried plugging it into a work computer that wasn't connected to my home network. The folder looked empty this time. Nothing inside. I thought maybe it had finally deleted for real. I ran a quick scan out of paranoia, and one temporary file appeared in the system log. Session 73. Wev. Created 9:42 a.m. that morning. I froze. I didn't even try to open it. I ejected the drive and left it on my desk. That day I tried to work, but I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept circling back to the recording. The woman's voice, the strange pauses, the metallic noise. I thought about the fact that it wasn't some old recording from a forgotten institution. Someone made it now. Someone uploaded it recently. And somehow, it included my name. That evening, I decided to destroy the drive completely. I took it apart with a screwdriver, cracked the platters, and tossed the pieces into different trash bins around the neighborhood. I felt ridiculous doing it, like I was feeding into some paranoia, but I needed it gone. For a few weeks after that, nothing happened. I avoided Tor completely. Tried to get back to normal. Then one night I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was blank. The message only contained a timestamp. Year 037. There was no attachment, no signature. It took me a minute to realize that 0037 was the timestamp from the audio file, the exact moment before the metallic noise. I deleted the email, blocked the address, changed all my passwords. That was 8 years ago. I haven't gone back on the dark web since. I moved to a new apartment, new job. Even changed my number. Every once in a while, though. I still think about the way the man's voice sounded when he said my name. Not threatening. Not angry. Just certain. As if he'd always known I would listen eventually. A few months ago, while organizing some old backup folders on a different computer, I found a single file buried deep in one of the directories. The name didn't mean anything at first glance, just a string of numbers and letters. But when I hovered over it, the metadata showed the same creation date, April 14th, 2017, 11:48 p.m., and the size was identical, 80.2 megabytes. I didn't open it. I just sat there, staring at it, realizing that no matter how many times I deleted that recording, it somehow always finds its way back. I've learned to leave it alone. I don't try to understand it anymore. But sometimes late at night when my apartment is quiet and the lights are off, I swear I can hear faint static coming from the speakers, like a hum building in the silence, waiting for me to listen again. It was September 2020, and Vancouver was still half asleep under the quiet that came with the pandemic. I'd been freelancing as a courier for almost a year, not for any official company, but for a darknet delivery network that operated quietly under layers of encryption. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. Most of what I handled were sealed envelopes, USB drives, small electronic parts, or prepaid phones. I never knew exactly what I was moving, and I never asked. That was part of the job. No curiosity, no questions, just pick up, drop off, confirm through the encrypted app, and wait for the balance to update. It was simple, almost mechanical. You'd get a ping on your phone, check the coordinates, verify a one-time code, pick up the item from a dead drop location, and deliver it to wherever the system told you. I'd done it dozens of times around Vancouver, Burnaby, and Richmond. I told myself it was harmless. Gray area work, sure, but not dangerous. That night, I got the alert around 10:47 p.m. It came with a sharp, tone that only appeared when something was marked urgent. The message said reroute, new drop. Confirmed, high bonus. There was a new address in Richmond, a quiet suburban neighborhood south of the river. I didn't think much of it. Reroutes happened occasionally if a client wanted extra discretion. The system always handled the updates automatically. I had the package in my van already. It was a small, hard-sided black case, sealed with tamper-proof tape and a numeric lock. Heavier than usual, maybe 3 or 4 kilos. I'd picked it up from a drop box behind an auto repair shop on Kingsway. The drive to Richmond was uneventful at first. Empty roads, light drizzle, the hum of the tires against wet asphalt. I kept glancing at the dashboard where the navigation app guided me with glowing blue lines. Everything about the address seemed normal. A cul-de-sac, detached houses, trimmed lawns, porch lights left on. It looked like the kind of place where nothing illegal would ever happen. The instructions said, "Leave package inside garage. Door code 8142, do not knock." When I pulled up, the house looked almost too ordinary. Beige siding, white garage door, no cars in the driveway. The windows were dark except for a faint glow from what looked like the kitchen. The air smelled of rain and cedar. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, watching for movement. Nothing. Just the steady hiss of drizzle on the windshield. I got out and went to the garage. The keypad was on the right side of the frame. My fingers hesitated over the numbers, half expecting the code to fail. But the door opened immediately, smooth, silent, like it had been recently serviced. The smell hit me right away. Bleach, strong, chemical, raw. It burned the inside of my nose. The floor was covered with clear plastic sheets, taped down neatly in overlapping layers. There was a folding table in the middle of the room, a few tools laid out in perfect order. A hammer, bolt cutters, a small circular saw. A metal bucket sat in the corner beside a drain. For a second, I thought maybe the homeowner was renovating or disinfecting. People were paranoid about cleanliness back then, but something about the setup was too deliberate, too clean. Then I noticed the laptop. It was open on the table, its screen glowing faintly in the dark. No screensaver, no login screen, just a live video feed. The image on it showed the same garage I was standing in. Same angle, same tools, same plastic floor. And me, standing right there in the doorway looking at the screen. For a long second, I couldn't move. My reflection on the screen looked slightly delayed, as if there was a 1-second lag. Then a small text box appeared at the bottom of the screen. Words began to type out automatically. Close the door. I didn't move. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at those 3 words. My heart started pounding so fast it hurt. The text blinked once, then again. Close the door. I don't know what it was, instinct, fear, or pure adrenaline, but I turned and ran. I didn't even think. I left the package right there on the floor, bolted out of the garage, and sprinted to the van. My shoes slapped against the wet driveway. I slammed the door shut and peeled off without even turning the headlights on until I was halfway down the street. I drove aimlessly for almost 20 minutes before pulling into an empty gas station lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I checked my phone, no signal. The courier app, which normally displayed my delivery status, was frozen. When I tried to reboot it, it wouldn't open. The GPS tracker on my dashboard went blank. Every device that was connected to that job, the phone, the tracker, the router, all went dark within minutes. By the time I got home, everything linked to that courier network had been wiped. The app icon vanished from my phone. The encrypted chat group was gone. My account balance, the thousands of dollars I'd earned over months, erased. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. Maybe it was a setup. Maybe the urgent reroute was some kind of test or punishment for breaking protocol. But the image of that garage wouldn't leave my head. The smell of bleach, the tools, the feed showing me standing inside. Whoever was on the other end had been watching in real time. The next morning, I checked the news out of habit. It was the local Richmond section that made my stomach twist. Unidentified remains found in suburban garage. The headline read, "Police had discovered partial human remains in a detached house after a neighbor complained about a smell." The address matched. Same street, same house. The article said no one had been living there for months. The property was rented under a fake name. The utilities paid through prepaid cards. The photo in the article showed the same garage door I'd opened less than 24 hours before. The police believed the house had been used for illicit activity, though they didn't specify what kind. Forensic teams were investigating, but the article ended with a note that authorities had found traces of cleaning agents and signs of recent occupancy. That part made my skin crawl. Recent occupancy. Over the next few days, I tried logging back into the courier network using a VPN and a backup phone, but every attempt failed. My credentials didn't exist anymore. My digital trail, payment logs, message threads, delivery history, had been wiped clean, like I had never been part of it at all. The weirdest thing was the silence. No follow-ups, no warnings, no threats. Just complete erasure. Every contact who'd ever pinged me through the darknet vanished. No one mentioned that delivery again. It was like the system had swallowed me whole and spit me out as if I'd never existed. A week later, I drove past the area again, just to see. The street was blocked off with yellow police tape. News vans parked along the curb. I saw officers walking in and out of the garage, hauling out bags, photographing the ground. I parked a few blocks away and watched from a distance. The bleach smell still hung faintly in the air, carried by the damp wind. I felt sick to my stomach. I thought about the package I'd left there, what was inside, who it was meant for, and why they wanted me there. Then I remembered the laptop feed. It wasn't just a camera. It was live. They were expecting me. Maybe the urgent reroute wasn't random. Maybe I wasn't the courier they wanted, but a substitute. Someone else might have been meant to close that door. After that day, I sold the van. I changed phones, deleted every encrypted chat app, scrubbed my devices, stopped using Tor completely. For months, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly avoided something much worse. I kept thinking about the person whose remains they'd found, wondering if the package had anything to do with them, or if it was just one part of something bigger. The story disappeared from the news after a couple of weeks. No follow-up reports, no arrests, no names released. Just another unsolved case that faded from memory. Sometimes when I drive through Richmond late at night, I catch myself glancing down side streets, looking for that beige house. I tell myself I wouldn't recognize it now, that it's probably been sold or torn down, but every so often I see one that looks just like it. Same siding, same garage door, and I feel that same tightness in my chest, that same instinct to turn away. I never found out who sent that reroute, or why my account was wiped. I don't think I want to. All I know is that somewhere, there's footage of me standing in that garage, frozen in place, reading those words on the screen. And whoever was watching that night, they knew exactly when I'd walk through that door. It started on a gray Tuesday afternoon in February, the kind where the sky over Denver looks like concrete, and the cold feels heavy in your chest. I was working from home, bored and restless, scrolling through Reddit threads I had no real interest in. One of them was titled something like "Weirdest Dark Web Things You've Ever Found." People were posting about hitman sites, black market stores, encrypted forums, all the usual fake stuff. But buried in the comments was a link that stood out. It wasn't formatted like the others, just a plain Tor link with a note that said, "Try this. It's a dark web survey criminals use for screening new members." Totally anonymous. You'll see what I mean. I copied the link out of curiosity. I'd been on the dark web a few times before, mostly for tech forums or privacy experiments, but I'd never seen anything that looked genuinely criminal. When I opened the link in Tor, it loaded a plain black page with white text in the center. "Welcome to the empathy survey." Below it, a small button said "Begin." I clicked. The first few questions seemed harmless, like some twisted personality test. Would you rather know everything or control everything? Would you rather hurt one to save many or save one and hurt many? They were odd, but I figured it was some kind of erg, maybe an edgy art project. Then the question shifted. Would you rather watch or participate? Would you stay silent for $50,000? How much is a life worth to you? Would you do it if no one would ever find out? Each one felt sharper, more specific. The background color began to pulse faintly with every new page, like a heartbeat behind the screen. When I finished, a message appeared. Thank you for your honesty. Session the 47 completed. There was no way to go back or refresh. I thought it was just a gimmick. I closed the tab and forgot about it. 2 days later, I got an email. The subject line said only, Session number 47. The sender's address ended with .onion, which made no sense. That domain type isn't supposed to show up in regular email inboxes. The message itself was short. Thank you for volunteering. Your session begins Friday at 10 p.m. Then an address, a real one, an industrial area south of Denver near Englewood. The kind of place with storage yards, junked cars, and warehouses that look abandoned. I laughed when I read it. It was too ridiculous to take seriously. I deleted the email and emptied the trash. Friday came and went. I worked late, ordered takeout, and around 9:30 p.m. I remembered the email and felt a small chill run through me. I checked my front door twice, just out of instinct. The building was quiet. At exactly 10 p.m., my phone started ringing. The number was blocked. I stared at it for a few seconds before picking up. A man's voice came through, calm, steady, and close. You missed your appointment. Then a click. Dead air. I just sat there. My pulse was hammering so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Felt stupid to be scared over what was probably just some troll who'd gotten my info from the survey. But then I remembered that I hadn't entered any personal details. No name, no email, no phone number, nothing. I had been using a VPN, Tor, and a burner browser setup. There was no logical way anyone could have connected it to me. That night I barely slept. Every noise in the hallway sounded like footsteps. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off on the couch with the light still on. The next morning, my phone was filled with notification pings from my security camera app. I lived in a small apartment on the 5th floor of a building in Capitol Hill. Decent place, not fancy, but I had a simple Wi-Fi cam mounted above the door for packages and safety. The alert showed motion detected between 10:04 p.m. and 12:16 a.m. I opened the video. At first, it was just static from the hallway. The lens flickered, struggling with low light. Then a shape appeared, a person standing about 6 feet from my door. They weren't moving, just standing perfectly still. No face visible, just a hood pulled low. They didn't knock, didn't pace, didn't leave. They just stood there for nearly 2 hours. At one point, a neighbor walked by from the far end of the hall and didn't even glance at them. The figure didn't react at all. It was like they weren't even breathing. I reported it to the building manager later that morning. He checked the hallway cameras but said the footage didn't show anything, except me going to my door the previous evening. I replayed mine for him. He frowned, said maybe my camera had glitched, maybe it was an overlay error. I knew what I saw, though. I knew the way the figure's shadow shifted slightly each time the motion sensor kicked in. It wasn't a glitch. Over the next few days, small things started happening. My router log showed unfamiliar IP addresses pinging my network at odd hours. My phone would light up with calls that ended before I could answer. One night, my laptop camera light flicked on by itself for less than a second. I disconnected it, but the paranoia was already inside me. I changed passwords, reset accounts, even wiped my drives and reinstalled everything from scratch. It didn't matter. The fear didn't go away. The warehouse address from the email kept looping in my mind. I tried to ignore it, but eventually curiosity won. The next Saturday afternoon, I drove out there just to see it in daylight. It was in an industrial zone off South Santa Fe Drive. A cluster of storage buildings and freight lots. The address matched a faded sign that said, Dunlop Freight Co. The main gate was chained but open enough to walk through. The ground was packed dirt mixed with snowmelt, tire ruts frozen solid. I walked around the side, half expecting someone to jump out. Nothing, just a few broken pallets, cigarette butts, and a line of old security cameras on the walls, all turned downward. I peeked inside through a window. The glass was dirty, but I could make out shapes. Folding chairs, a white screen, maybe a projector stand. It looked like someone had set up some kind of meeting room. I felt a drop of sweat roll down my neck even though it was freezing. I turned and walked quickly back to my car. When I looked over my shoulder, one of the overhead cameras had turned slightly toward me. I left Denver the next morning. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that some weird group had created the survey to freak people out. But on the drive south, my phone buzzed again. Another email, same address ending in .onion. This one had no subject, no text, just an attachment, a single image. I opened it before I could stop myself. It was a screenshot. My front door, same hallway, same camera angle as mine. Only this time the figure wasn't outside. They were inside, standing right in front of the camera, inches from the lens. The photo had been taken from my own camera feed. I didn't go home that night. I called a friend, stayed at his place in Colorado Springs. Filed a report with the police the next day, but I didn't tell them the full story. Just said someone had been stalking me, possibly hacking my cameras. They took my statement, said they'd look into it. Weeks went by, no update. I replaced my phone, changed my number, even moved apartments. But somehow the emails kept finding me. Every few months a new message would appear from that same address. Never with text. Just a timestamp and a location. The last one came in July. It said only, "Session Nairobi 48 begins soon." It's been months since then. I still check the peephole every night before locking up. I still keep a towel draped over my laptop camera. I try to tell myself that maybe it was all a scam. A long psychological game meant to scare random people for data or control. But I know what I saw in that video. I know someone stood outside my door for 2 hours. And I know that whoever they were, they picked me because I clicked begin.